Now, let's explore the specific type of relative strength we focus on, pattern relative strength. The concept of relative strength has been a core part of my personal trading philosophy for over 2 decades. In fact, I wrote a book called Trading ETFs, Gaining an Edge with Technical Analysis, which focuses on identifying sector relative strength using ETFs. While our strategy at MTG has evolved to focus on individual assets like stocks and cryptocurrencies, the underlying principles of relative strength remain the same. By comparing an asset's performance to its relevant benchmark, we can identify those with the greatest potential for outperformance. Pattern relative strength is a way to identify stocks, cryptocurrencies, or other assets that are outperforming their respective benchmarks by comparing their price patterns. Note this is different from the more commonly known Relative Strength Index, or RSI, a momentum oscillator. To identify pattern relative strength, we compare the chart of an individual asset to a relevant benchmark. Now, the choice of benchmark depends on the type of asset you're trading and the market you're operating in. For stocks, the benchmark could be a broad market index like the S&P 500 or NASDAQ if you trade the US markets. If you trade the UK markets, for example, you would look at the FTSE 100 index. Or if you're trading the Indian stock market, you could compare the stocks to the Sensex index as a relevant benchmark. You could also use a sector-specific ETF as a benchmark if you wanted to compare a stock's performance to its individual industry sector. Now, if you're trading cryptocurrencies, we typically compare altcoins to major coins like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which serve as benchmarks for the crypto market. If you're trading Forex, you might compare a specific currency pair to a relevant currency index, such as the US dollar index for USD pairs or the euro currency index for euro pairs. If you happen to trade futures, your benchmark could be a broader index that represents the asset class, such as the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index, the GSCI. The key is to choose a benchmark that is relevant to your asset and market and that provides a meaningful basis for comparison. By adapting the relative strength concept to your specific trading context, you can effectively identify the assets with the greatest potential for outperformance in your market. Let's take an insightful look at the power of spotting pattern relative strength. Here we have a weekly chart of NVIDIA on the top compared to the benchmark S&P 500 index on the bottom. Again, we use a line chart for easy comparison. Now, I've broken up the chart into 4 parts here so we can walk through where we actually spot the relative strength starting to happen. In the first part, notice that the price of NVIDIA and the price of the S&P 500 are relatively trading in sync with one another, no major divergences. But as we move into the second part of the chart, we start to see something a little bit different. Notice how, as the S&P 500 is just drifting sideways, that NVIDIA actually has entered into an uptrend, setting higher highs and higher lows, while the benchmark S&P 500 index is just sideways. Now, when we get to the third part of the chart, notice the horizontal line. The horizontal line shows that at the third part of the chart, NVIDIA broke out to a new 52-week high. However, even though NVIDIA broke out to a new 52-week high, look at that horizontal line on the S&P 500, and you'll see that the index remained well below its 52-week high. So the key point here is that NVIDIA started to show relative strength, and that led it to break out to a new high ahead of the S&P 500 index. In the last part of the chart, we see that the S&P 500 index enters into correction mode and enters into a pullback. But during that same period, notice that all that happened with NVIDIA was the price merely went sideways and consolidated near its highs as the S&P 500 was pulling back. Now, of course, if a stock is so strong that it goes sideways as the index is pulling back, typically that's the first stock to rally to new highs when the market bounces again. So this weekly chart clearly showcases pattern relative strength, with NVIDIA demonstrating great resilience, bullish divergence, and growth potential even when the overall market is struggling. Similarly, in the cryptocurrency market, we can compare altcoins like Solana, SOL, to Bitcoin, BTC. On this chart, we see that Solana is showcasing pattern relative strength by outpacing the gains of Bitcoin during a market rally. Again, the concept of pattern relative strength works in any market and any asset type. You simply compare the individual asset you're looking at with the most relevant index or sector. So let me show you how to set up your TradingView chart so that you can quickly identify pattern relative strength like this. Okay, once you have your TradingView account set up, follow these steps. So the first step is we'll want to change our chart from a candlestick chart to a line chart. So we click here on the chart type and we select line. The second step is you'll want to search for the asset that you want to analyze and add it to your chart. So you click on the search box here and type in the symbol that you're looking for, and that will add that symbol to your chart. Next is you click on this plus sign here next to the search box, and you'll see where it says Compare Symbol. This is where you choose the underlying benchmark that you want to compare your asset to. So for example, you could select NASDAQ, S&P 500, Bitcoin, or whatever type of benchmark you want to compare to. You enter the symbol in here. Once you've done so, your chart should look something like this, with the asset on top and the benchmark you've chosen below. Now you're ready to look for instances where the asset's relative strength is rising, indicating outperformance relative to the price of the underlying benchmark. A little pro tip here is you can also press the settings icon and select percent to change the price scale on the right to a percentage scale. This makes it even easier to directly compare relative performance over any given period. So by setting up your charts like this, you can quickly scan through multiple assets and identify those with the strongest pattern relative strength in their respective markets. Now let's check out your skills at identifying pattern relative strength. I'll provide you with a chart of a cryptocurrency and its benchmark, and your goal is to determine whether the cryptocurrency is showing pattern relative strength or not. In this example, we're comparing Pendle, a leading crypto altcoin at this time, with the performance of Ethereum, a benchmark for the overall performance of the altcoin market. So first, analyze the chart and look for instances where Pendle is outperforming ETH, indicating pattern relative strength. Consider the overall trend of both Pendle and ETH. Is Pendle showing strength even when Ethereum is struggling? Formulate your answer. Is Pendle showing pattern relative strength compared to Ethereum? So pause your video now and take a moment to complete the exercise. Once you've finished your analysis, resume the video and we'll discuss the answer together. Okay, welcome back. Let's review that chart together. As you can see, Pendle has been consistently outperforming ETH over the given period. Even when ETH was experiencing pullbacks or consolidation, notice that Pendle managed to rally to new highs or consolidate near its highs. This is a clear example of pattern relative strength. Pendle is showing its unique ability to outperform the benchmark and the broader cryptocurrency market. So by identifying assets like Pendle that are showing strong pattern relative strength, we can potentially increase our chances of success and minimize our risk in the markets, regardless of whether we're trading stocks, cryptocurrencies, or other assets.